We'll be starting in just a minute or so. Please make sure you're muted and have your camera turned off if you don't want to be included in the live stream. It looks like the YouTube just started. All right, Dani, it's after 7. We've got the live stream is rolling and we have a bunch of people in here. Why don't you tell us about yourself and let's get started.
Okay. I'm Dani. First of all, I've got some throat stuff going on, so I'm going to do my best to handle it gracefully. But okay, let me get myself organized here. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm so excited that you're here to learn about the Inset Outline, which is my favorite ever writing tool. I'm going to walk through this presentation with you guys. And if you have questions, we're going to do some questions at the end. But I can't see the chat right now, so it'd probably be better to take a note and then just ask at the end. So welcome to the Inset Outline, a game-changing tool for novelists. This is my all-time favorite writing tool thus far. I'm Dani Abernathy. I'm a fantasy writer and book coach, and you might be wondering what a book coach is. I'm kind of like an editor who works with you while you write. So I'm a teacher. I teach you about writing tools and methods and story structure. I'm an encourager for when you get in that sort of writerly valley of despair, and I'm a project manager to help you finish your book. And I can work with you at any time during your writing process, whether you're planning, writing your first draft, revising, or getting ready to publish. I am an Author Accelerator Advanced Certified Book Coach. So that means that I have gone through a training program with Author Accelerator. And Author Accelerator is a program that trains book coaches to give writers the support they need to write books worth reading. And it was founded by Jenny Nash, and she's a great teacher and coach, and she actually created this Inset Outline tool that we're going to talk about tonight. All right, so today we're going to talk about the nature of a novel, the problem with pantsing and plotting, bringing both sides of the writing equation together, the rules of the Inset Outline. We'll go over a case study, and then we'll do questions. So a novel is a complex, multi-layered, multivariable, irreducible creation intended to capture the human condition. And we sometimes forget how complex writing a novel is, how many different things you have to hold in your head at one time, how many different skills you have to learn, how many different pieces you have to track. It's really hard to write a novel. And a novelist must design a structure to contain this massive amount of information, while simultaneously spinning a tale that delights and engages the reader. So the two typical reactions to this reality are either you kind of ignore the burden of the structure and focus exclusively on the emotion, and we would call that pantsing or winging it. And some people can actually pants and write a good book. They just have this kind of intuitive knowledge. They've been touched by the story gods and they just get story and how it works. But for the rest of us, that doesn't work. That has certainly not been my experience. I've had to learn how to write. And I've also realized that I need to separate out the planning with the actual writing part. So the other side of the writing equation is that you ignore the reality of the emotion and you focus exclusively on the structure. And so that would be the plotting side of things. And there are inefficiencies with both of these extremes. And by thinking that we're either pantsers or plotters, we kind of do ourselves a disservice, because as a writer, you have to do both. You have to have kind of the emotion side and you have to have the structure side. So there's this really great quote that says, art is fire plus algebra. And fire is the emotion and algebra is the logic. Pantsers love the fire. They love the creative part. It's generative, it's free-flowing and passionate. You're drawing on your imagination and just letting the story take you. You're tapping into the unconscious and like making these intuitive connections as you write. But pantsers tend to ignore the algebra side, the structure and the logic and the analytical aspects of writing a novel, as if those elements are just gonna magically appear by themselves. And by ignoring the algebra, you're really taking a risk because a lot of times your writing will end up flat and you'll have big plot holes and your story is going to be unengaging to your reader. And then you have to go back and fix all those problems. And plotting demands that the writer perform two different functions at the same time. And that's really difficult to do. Rachel Aaron says in her book, 2000 to 10,000, I was doing the hardest work of writing, figuring out what needs to happen to move the story forward in the most dramatic and exciting fashion, in the most time-consuming way, in the middle of writing itself. It's really hard to do both things at the same time. And it's, for me at least, it's really slow to do both things at the same time. And when you try to, it's often inefficient, time-consuming, frustrating. It exposes you to all kinds of doubt. And there's this myth that we should be able to sit down and just write this story. It's just going to flow from you. The muse is going to meet you and you're going to get all the words on the page and it's going to be beautiful. But that's often not how it happens. And it can be really hard to try to do it that way. And so then you're left with these questions like, why can't I figure this out? Why isn't my book working? Why isn't my book selling? And then if you're me, you get to the point where like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I write? I should never write again. Which is not a good place to be. Plotters, on the other hand, love the algebra side of the equation. They love this cool logic of a massive story grid, as if it can save you from digging deep into the emotion of your novel. So plot-heavy methods often miss the real story, the meaning and heart and soul, and those are all the reasons that readers care about your book and your characters. So often when we're writing from a more plotting side of things, we're kind of up here on the waves. Like we can see the island, we can see the pirate ship, we can see the coast, we can see the waters, but we're really up here on the surface level and we're missing everything that's happening down below, all the real story and the depth and everything that's going on beneath the surface. So what we need is a way to combine the power of both sides of the equation, the fire and the algebra. And we need it to be simple enough that writers from both camps will actually do it. And I want to say now that, if you have a system that works for you, you should absolutely use that system. You have to find what works for you as a writer. And sometimes that means pulling from multiple places. So maybe you pull pieces from Save the Cat or the Story Grid, or K.M. Weiland's very structured percentile kind of approach. But if you find something that works, then use it. In my experience, the Inset Outline works for a lot of writers because it's simple enough and it's kind of intuitive and organic. So it appeals to plotters, but it also has this really clear, simple structure so you can get in all the pieces that you need to make a novel work. Okay, so let's talk about the Inset Outline. The Inset Outline is really simple. It's just two things. It's plot and point. So we're marrying the inside of your story with the outside of your story in every step of the novel. So you're marrying what's happening on the outside, the plot, the events of the book, with what's going on inside your protagonist, the inside, how they're making sense and meaning of the events that are happening. And this tool really gives you the ability to step back from the details. So you can see your whole novel in your hand. You can see the big picture. It's kind of like drawing a blueprint or making a scale model of a house before you build. You're really able to see the shape of it, to see how it holds together, to see what it would be like to move around. You can identify like, this kitchen is too small, or maybe you realize like, actually, I want a tiny house and not this 7-bedroom sprawling ranch style house. So we can do the same things with our novels. We can find the problems. We can figure out if this is the story we really want to tell before we spend 5 years and 400 pages and maybe a bunch of money writing a novel that doesn't do what we want it to do. Because who wants to do that? I don't. I have done it. And that's when I found the Inset Outline, because I had gotten so frustrated I just wanted to quit. Okay. So in the Inset Outline, you're looking at the plot of each scene of your book. So that's what happens in your scene. And then you're also looking at the point of that scene. And that's why it matters to the protagonist. And then there's this because of that. So because of the plot and the point, it leads to the next scene. This is your cause and effect trajectory. This is what makes the reader keep turning pages. It's how you develop narrative drive. So the Inset Outline is really asking you for each scene, why is this scene here? Why does it matter to the protagonist? How is it moving the story forward? So it's asking you these questions for each scene, and then you tie it together with the next scene. One thing causes the next scene to happen. So let's look at this. Let's look at an example. This is from Ryan Norman, who I think I saw logged in just before I switched over to this slideshow. Ryan is one of my clients and one of my real life writing friends. We're in a writing group together. And he actually wrote this story, The Bandaged Forest. I think Ryan said he wrote an early manuscript several years ago, and then he rewrote it in 2019. And when he got to the end of writing that manuscript, he kind of realized like what he actually wanted it to be about. So then we went through and created his Inset Outline. And now he's just started rewriting it. He actually just submitted the first chapter, this scene, for our writing group this week. And so this is a YA fantasy about Jabu, who's kind of trying to figure out where he belongs between like his humanity and his draw to the environment and the forest. And he realizes he has these magical powers and this calling, all these good fantasy things. So let's read the first scene. Jabu attends a groundbreaking ceremony for C4's site expansion in the forest. C4 is a big like energy company in his town. The town is in high spirits, but Jabu dreads the expansion. He thinks of the childhood pet possum he accidentally killed and the forest he pathologically avoids. A voice, the green man, tells Jabu he can stop C4's expansion. Jabu resists, but sees a dead possum in the road and decides to follow the voice into the forest. So the point of this scene, this is how Jabu is making meaning of this scene. It says, I learned a long time ago people in the woods don't mix. We're just too savage. But the voice says the forest needs me to come in. I'll keep my distance from the animals. I won't let it happen again. What happened to my possum? I won't let myself get close again. So you can see how the point really adds depth to the scene. We're really getting in Jabu's head. We're already starting to get a hint of what his character arc might be. We're seeing his reasons for why he's making choices. And Ryan here has written his point in first person. You don't have to do that. You can write it in third, or you can write it however you want. But first person sometimes helps you get to know the voice of your character a little bit more. And if sometimes you have trouble like accessing kind of that emotional layer of your story, first person can help with that too. Okay, so we have the scene and the point for this first scene, and then we have because of the scene and the point, Jabu and his dog follow a coyote to a sick tree at the C4 site in the forest. Jabu discovers the summoner's bone, which is a magical bone. When he picks it up, forest animals freak out. Jabu flees while his dog fights the coyote. The coyote appears, growling, "You've changed everything." And so the point of this scene, it was supposed to be simple. Take the bone, then C4 stops the expansion, but it all went to shit. Now my dog's gone and the whole forest went rabid. I made this happen. I dragged my toxic ass into the woods and now it's all poisoned. So again, you can see how Jabu is making decisions. You can already get the sense of narrative drive. Jabu made a choice in the first scene, and it caused what happened in the next scene. And this continues through all the scenes. So in a really tight inside outline, you can literally track the whole novel. You can track the character arc. You can see the holes. You can see if the narrative drive is driving all the way through. You can see whether you have that like surprising but inevitable ending that you hear about. So this tool is kind of magical in its simplicity, but in all that it allows you to see. So let's look just briefly at the because of that again, because it's so important. In a really strong inside outline, this is linked to both the plot and the point. It needs to come from both. Both aspects should move the story forward. So let's look again at these two scenes. So the because of that, because of the plot, because the forest was threatened, and the character's response to the plot, Jabu feels responsible for harm that comes to the forest. He went into the forest in the second scene. It's both the plot events and Jabu's response to the plot events, his internal reality, that are driving forward. Occasionally, you might only have either the scene or the point driving the novel forward. For example, if there was like a natural disaster or a plane crash. But if that happens, then you would want to then immediately take it back to this dual cause and effect trajectory. You want to then make it again about the protagonist's internal reality. Because if you just keep having random plot events happen, your reader's going to check out. Okay, let's talk about the rules of the inside outline. It should be no more than 3 pages double spaced. That's not a lot of space, and that's on purpose. If you can't get your story logic down in these 3 pages, then you're not going to be able to get it down in 10 pages or 300 pages. You really need to get it down in a short constrained space first, and then you can expand. So no more than 3 lines per bullet. So that would be each scene has 3 lines, each point has 3 lines. And that's because if you keep adding details and like plot points and all these things, then you just get overwhelmed in the details and you can't see kind of the bones of the story. Each scene must cause the next scene. So that's that because of that trajectory. If it's not here in your 3 pages, it's not going to be here in your 300 pages. And then you want to test everything with the 10 questions, which we'll talk about next. And one of the wonderful things about the inside outline is that you can write your inside outline and then pass it off to a critique partner or a writing group or a coach and give them these 10 questions, and they can really evaluate how well your novel is working and look for places that need to be strengthened. Okay, so what are the 10 questions? Number 1, check to be sure there is one clear point. Is it about something? And this is a big picture story point. This is the point of your whole novel. What are you trying to say about the world? You could also call this your theme. A lot of things hinge on this point. So you actually really do need to choose a point, because from your point, you're going to choose your conflict and your character arc, and everything needs to relate back to the point. 2, check to be sure that point of view is consistent and clear. So does each character telling the story have a right to tell that story? Why are they telling this part of the story? How is their arc driving the story forward? 3, check for an arc of change. Does the ending resolve the problem of the beginning? Story is about change in perspective or belief or understanding or identity. So we need to be able to see it flow from beginning to end, and the end needs to answer the question to solve the problem that we were presented in the beginning. 4, check the cause and effect trajectory. Do the actions of the protagonist drive to the next thing that happens in every chapter? 5, check the force of opposition. Is it clear what's standing in the protagonist's way on the inside and the outside? So you need both external and internal forces of opposition for a novel to be really engaging. And people don't change unless they have to. So your character's not going to change unless something makes them, and that's that force of opposition. 6, check the character motivation and logic. Do the protagonist's actions make sense? Would they actually behave this way? So, would a real person do this thing? 7, check to make sure your protagonist has agency over their decisions. This is a really common problem in novels and Inset Outlines. We want the protagonist to be making choices for themselves. We want those choices to have consequences. So we want the character to be making their situation worse. We want them to put themselves into the situation of the climax. We don't want external events just to sort of happen randomly. And we don't want other people to be making choices for the protagonist. You really want the protagonist to be the one choosing and acting. 8, check the consequences of those decisions. Is something at stake? So what happens if the character fails? If they fail and nothing changes, then why are we reading this book? What's it about? Why does it matter? Why does the story matter? 9, check pacing and flow of the story. Is there tension throughout? You really want tension to be running throughout the whole story, every scene. And 10, check genre conventions. Does the story do what the genre needs it to? Every genre has reader expectations. So in a murder mystery, the reader expects there to be a murder and clues and red herrings and a reveal at the end. In fantasy, the reader expects magic or mythical creatures or something that exists outside the realm of reality. So the Inset Outline is a great place to really make sure you're getting those genre conventions in there. Okay, let's talk about some tips. These are my tips as a coach who really, the most important part for me as a coach is the emotional thread, the emotional logic, the point part. And so when I work with a writer, I tend to really drill down into the point. And so these are some tips for how to really get that emotional level built in. So first, know your point, your big story novel point. What are you trying to say about the world? And then decide everything else from there. So once you have your point, you want to focus on your protagonist's arc in relation to the point. So what one question or misbelief in your character would best illustrate your point? Next, you want to make each point in your Inset Outline, the scene point combo. You want to make each point a stepping stone in your protagonist's arc. So we should be able to see them go from their beginning belief to their ending belief. We should be able to walk with them through the story. And within those points, you don't want to repeat beats. So you don't want your character to just think repeatedly people aren't trustworthy, people aren't trustworthy, people aren't trustworthy. If they come back to that, people aren't trustworthy, it needs to be in a new way, a deeper way with some new understanding. And then in each scene, the character should make a choice or ask a question that drives the scene forward. So that's that narrative drive. Okay, frequently asked questions about the Inset Outline. Do I put in every scene? No. You can't put in every scene in 3 pages. You're just going to put in the high and the low points of your novel. So Kurt Vonnegut has this video on YouTube that you can Google where he makes the Cinderella story graph. So he graphs out the story of Cinderella, and it looks something like this. And you can see there's these kind of tentpole scenes. Horrible stepmother meets fairy godmother meets the prince. And these are the scenes that you would put in your Inset Outline. These are the ones that really the story hangs on. And with just these scenes, you can see the arc of change, you can see the resolution of the conflict, you can see all the really important story elements. If you can't make just these tentpole scenes make sense, then, it's not going to make sense if you add more. Once you get these 3 pages in shape, then you can add the rest of your scenes. And so a full inside outline with all the scenes would be 10 pages or more. What if I have multiple points of view? The inside outline is really flexible. You can absolutely use it for multiple points of view. So this is from my inside outline. And you can see that I have 2 different point of view characters here. I have the yellow, which is Ingie, my protagonist, and then I have the blue, which is Gideon, sort of the love interest. And within each color, so the yellow scenes would drive to the next yellow scene, that because of that cause and effect trajectory would drive between the yellow scenes. And then the blue would drive between the blue. If you choose to do multiple point of views, each of your characters need to have a full character arc. So they need to be changing in some way. And that arc should relate to the point of your novel. And you also, the point of view character in each scene needs to be the one who's making the choice that drives the story forward. Can I use an inside outline to revise? Yes, absolutely. So this is kind of the cycle of revision. You can see in this first little bubble, there's 3 steps: assess and evaluate, problem solve, and execute the fix. And the inside outline really comes in on those first 2 steps: assess and evaluate, and problem solve. So you can use your inside outline to find these big structural problems. And once you have those fixed, then you move on to micro revisions, which would be like line editing, word choice, flow, grammar. And those are the things that people probably think of when they think of revision. But you don't want to be making your novel pretty if, like, back to the house analogy, you don't want to be painting your walls a new color if they're about to fall over. You want to really fix the structural issues first. And then once you have both of those settled, you can get feedback and then kind of repeat the process. So what this would look like in a novel or an inside outline is kind of like this. You can see that I've added some revise points here that I need to revise. You could also say, like, add in, make a list of things you need to add in. But the way you would do this is, once you've written your manuscript, you would create an inside outline that reflects what you actually have written on the page. Because a lot of times our manuscripts don't reflect, the outline that we had started with when we started writing. So you want your inside outline to reflect what you've actually written. And then between looking at your manuscript and your inside outline, you figure out what needs to be fixed. So then you can make notes of it here and then revise from your notes. You can also use the inside outline as you're writing. So for example, if you're halfway through your novel and you realize, my protagonist has a brother, you can make a note of that in previous scenes on your outline and say, like, add brother to this scene, add brother to this scene. And then on the scenes you have yet to write, you can actually revise those to reflect the brother so that you can incorporate that change as you write forward. Okay, so let's talk about a case study. I'm very excited about this, and I'm going to send you a link. Let me stop sharing here. And oh dear. Oh my goodness. I'm not using my normal mouse and it's more clicky than my other one. Okay, so I've just put a link in the chat to a Google Drive folder that has my presentation and it has a copy of Ryan's first few scenes on his inside outline and some of another document that we're about to talk about. And then it also has a copy of Patrick's inside outline. So let me get that going. That was the wrong one. Okay, are you guys seeing case study, 1-page book summary? Can someone just type in chat like yes? Thank you. Okay. So this was submitted by Patrick, who lives in Belgium. So it's like 2 in the morning there. He's not here right now. So we're recording this for him. And he's bravely volunteered to let us go over his work here. And I just want to say that I forgot to tell Patrick to double space his Inset Outline, so it is not double spaced. So it's a little longer than yours should be when you do your first your first round. So the first thing we're going to look at is this 1-page book summary. And this is all the important parts of your book in 1 page. So it has your title, genre, word count, ideal reader, comp titles, point, main character arc, main conflict, timeline, plot summary, best and worst review. And you might think that this wouldn't be necessarily a helpful tool, but a book coach can see so much information from this single tool. So for example, you can see that I've commented on pretty much everything here. So let's go through and look at Patrick's Inset Outline, or 1-page book summary. So the title of his book is The Adventures of Amelia Borgiotti, Nero's Curse. The genre is paranormal romance ghost story, which is a YA crossover. So I commented and said, does this mean YA adult crossover? If so, you'll need to focus on one age group if you plan to traditionally publish. I think he might mean that it's a paranormal romance ghost story crossover, but I'm not sure. So I wanted to I know that he's planning to traditionally publish. So I wanted to just mention that he'll need to pick YA or adult if he wants to go that route. So his word count is 118,000 words. I've said this is a high word count for a debut YA novel. Aim for 90,000 words at most. With a contemporary YA, you would want to aim for 80,000 words, but fantasy sci-fi tends to have a little bit higher word count. Patrick's ideal reader is a curious 15-year-old girl who wonders about life, death, and what it's like to meet a ghost and become their more than close friend. I said, great, I can imagine this girl. Do you know what kinds of hobbies she might enjoy? What does she hope for? What does she fear? The more you know about her, the more you can write for her. Patrick's comp titles look really good. The only one he might consider removing or replacing is The Night Circus, because that is an adult book, and you really want your comp titles to be as close to your book, like on the bookshelf of the bookstore, as possible. Okay, let's look at Patrick's point. So this is the point of his novel, and he says, when we haven't finished doing what we need to do while alive, we risk coming back as a ghost to finish the job. I said, the simplicity here is great, because the point oftentimes kind of reads like a bumper sticker, like love conquers all. But this almost reads more like a hook or a tagline than a point. Can you focus this a little? What are you trying to tell those 15-year-old readers about how they should live before they die? What idea do you want your readers to walk away with? So to me, this point only feels applicable if you believe in ghosts. So if Patrick's reader doesn't believe in ghosts, it almost seems like this point doesn't apply to them. So I would like to know what Patrick wants his readers to know about how they need to live right now. So I'm already suspecting that maybe Patrick's novel isn't going to have a very clear point, because I'm not quite sure how this point will come into play in the Inset Outline. Okay, the main character arc. Amelia Borgiotti is a clever and willful orphan girl who dies saving children in an orphanage fire and returns as a ghost. So first of all, amazing protagonist, like what a girl. I'm pretty sure that every 15-year-old girl who reads this book is going to be thrilled to read about Amelia. Wishing to help others, she saves a banished ghost, the story from Nero's curse. But Nero gets his revenge by trapping her in a living host, Bartimaeus. So then Amelia she eventually goes into another woman's body, Ambra, and Ambra recruits her boyfriend, Tiberio, to host the ghost that Amelia is in love with. And together they all kind of battle this curse. And so remember, this is in the main character arc part of the one-page book summary. So I've said, I love a badass teen girl, but this is more of a plot summary than a character arc. How is Amelia changing over the course of the book? What lie or belief about herself or the world is she confronting? Why, after she dies, does she still want to help others? From the beginning to the end, we should be able to see a clear change along one issue or belief in Amelia. So now I'm getting a sense that maybe Amelia will be a flat character in the Inset Outline, but we'll see in a little while. Okay, the main conflict, the external conflict, is about Nero and his curse. And Patrick does a really good job of this throughout the novel. It carries all the way through. There's one clear external conflict. So he did a really good job with the external conflict. Now the internal conflict, Amelia knows that helping others can lead to complications, but she can't not help. That's her character. She also needs to keep her promise to Ambra, even if it means stopping living through her. So I've said, why does Amelia feel compelled to help people? What in her past has taught her that she must help? How does she confront this during the story? So we sort of get a sense, we have a sense of where Amelia's arc is starting and that she has this kind of compulsion to help people, but we don't really get a sense of like what in the story she's confronting in that, what's making her confront that, and yeah, where she ends up in either of these points. We don't know where she ends up. So the timeline, the novel takes place in 1643 in Italy. And the plot summary, we've kind of already covered in the character arc. So I said, how is your point reflected in this plot? What unfinished business did Amelia have that's compelling her to help these people? Does that unfinished business get resolved by the end? If so, shouldn't she move on? Because remember, Patrick's point was basically, if you have unfinished business on Earth, then you come back as a ghost. But at the end, Amelia lives a second death and then returns as a ghost. So I would expect that if his point is about sort of your unfinished work, that the novel then would be about the ghost Amelia sort of reconciling with that and making peace with it so that she could move on. But that's not what happens here. So again, I'm getting a sense of maybe what things I'm going to find in the Inset Outline. Okay, let's look at the best and worst review. These might seem like odd things to put in a one-page book summary, but a lot of times you as the author kind of reveal things about your work in them. So Patrick's best review says, I'll keep a lookout for ghosts from now on and welcome them in. And I've said, how do you want to affect your readers on an emotional level? How do you hope your readers will be changed? You know, I think as writers, a lot of us want to be writers because we know the power of story and we know how books can change your life and how you can find yourself in a story and how you can have your perspective changed. And my guess is that that's what Patrick wants to do through this book as well. But that element is really missing from this best review. And so I'm kind of wondering if maybe Patrick's missing some clarity or some depth in his novel. The worst review, so rich and complex with ghosts possessing the living who are possessed by words of others on their skin that I had to read it twice. Even then, I didn't understand it all. I said, this almost sounds like a positive review, rich and complex. Do you mean that you're afraid your reader will be confused and unable to follow the story? I must admit, I felt a bit fuzzy about several aspects of your Inset Outline, so I think you already have an inkling of where your story needs work. Okay, let's look at Patrick's Inset Outline. First of all, I want to say that Patrick's story has some really amazing things happening here. We obviously have just an amazing protagonist, Amelia, who is super brave and takes risks. And I think that 15-year-old girls are going to want to follow her through this story. I think that 36-year-old women would want to follow her through the story. So good job with that, Patrick. This is a ghost story, and Patrick has some really creepy things happening. So this curse, like, gets under your skin and it looks like ink, and it's the words of these trapped souls, and they like creep up your body and eventually take over your body. So that's terrifying. Patrick has written his scenes in scenes, which might seem like a silly thing to say, but a lot of times writers, so a scene is the things that are actually happening in a set period of time. It's what the characters are doing, what they're saying, the choices that they're making. But a lot of times writers in the Inset Outline will use the scene as almost like to fill in backstory or to kind of go big picture, or say like the characters are planning this thing. But Patrick's actually written in scenes. So that's really great. He has actual scenes written. This is actually a book he's written as well. So I assume that his scenes are scenes on the page. And then he actually has really great cause and effect trajectory, especially in this first section, but throughout the whole thing, like the events pretty much flow logically from one to the next. Things tend to cause the next thing. There are places where things could be strengthened, but generally he has good cause and effect trajectory built in. Okay, so I'm going to switch really briefly over to another document and show you a letter that I have written for feedback for Patrick. And I'm just going to show you the 10 questions here are the ones we went over in the Inset Outline. And all of this yellow is questions where I feel like Patrick has could do some work on these questions. So you can see that I've highlighted something in every question except for the last two. And that might feel a little bit overwhelming, but all of these things are fixable. And this is pretty common. It's pretty common to have issues with many of these questions, especially if your point and your character arc and your force of opposition, those kind of really foundational level things are not clear. Okay, I'm going to switch back to this other document. Okay. So there are 4 main things I found in Patrick's Inset Outline that I want us to talk about. The first is an unclear point. The second is an unclear character arc. The third is lack of character agency. And then the fourth is unclear point of view. So we've already talked quite a bit about the point. And so the point is when you have unfinished business, you come back as a ghost, basically. And the only place I'm really seeing that point is in this first scene of Patrick's novel. So Amelia dies saving children in an orphanage fire and is reborn as a ghost in the church. She's the only woman among mainly aged male ghosts, including a bishop who's been dead over a century. And then her point, Amelia wishes to help so much that she came back as a ghost to continue her work. So you can see there that something's keeping Amelia here. I'm not entirely sure what it is. I've said, good, Amelia's desire clearly causes what happens here. She comes back as a ghost. But why does she want to help others so much? What's driving her? I'd like to know what she wants as well. What's her goal? How will she know if she's accomplished her work? So I'm not getting a sense of what her unfinished work is that made her come back as a ghost. And then as we continue through the book, in this scene, for example, so Ambra is the woman that Amelia's ghost goes into. Ambra convinces her love Tiberio to host Aurelio, who is the ghost that Amelia is in love with. And together they discover the world of ghosts and Nero's cursed black book. They go to Angelus, which is a statue, where Aurelio releases the soul of his lost child hidden inside. Aurelio starts to fade, but Amelia calls him back. So I say, why does she call him back? And why does he need to stay? Shouldn't he move on? Isn't that the point you're trying to make? That when you resolve whatever it is you neglected in life, you get to move on? And then down here at the very end, in the last scene, Amelia and Aurelio go into this older woman's body, and she actually dies with them in her. And then so Amelia and Aurelio live another death and emerge as ghosts. And so I say, again, specifically in relation to Aurelio, why wouldn't Aurelio move on? Didn't he release his inner child? Doesn't him staying counteract the point of your book? So you can see that the point Patrick has written down isn't really coming through in this story. And because of that, well, related to that, it's kind of an unclear character arc for Amelia. So in a really strong Inset Outline, the character arc is based off the point. So in Ryan's Inset Outline, for example, I don't have his one-page book summary with me, but the point of his book is something about people have something to contribute to the earth. They don't just take from the earth, they contribute to it. Ryan can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, or you can just look in the file the folder I sent you.
No, I think you got it.
Okay, good. And then Jabu's character arc is about finding his place between his humanity and his draw to the forest and his actually connection to the forest. So you can see how Jabu's character arc is drawn from the point and reflects the point. Amelia's character arc is maybe loosely related. She has this compulsion to help people, which I assume has something to do with the unfinished work she has in life, but we don't really see that play through this Inset Outline. And at the end, this last scene, okay, well, let's see, up here, where is it? Somewhere in here, Amelia wants to go apologize to Bartimaeus for the pain she caused him when she was embodying his body. And to me, that reflects that she hasn't changed, because she's still living for, here it is. So this bottom part, why does she want forgiveness for this? What's driving her to always help, not harm others? It doesn't feel to me that Amelia has changed at all. Is she different than she was at the beginning of the book? Because she's still sort of living for other people's well-being. And then at the end, of course, this last point, freedom sometimes comes through sacrifice and pain. Amelia is free again to start a new chapter of her death with Aurelio, wiser, warier, but still tempted by adventure. It doesn't relate at all to her starting point, the starting point of her arc. And the points here aren't really helping Patrick as much as they could. So let's look at a few of these points. We'll look at this one. Amelia plans to prove that she deserves her place among the venerable ghosts and stop the living walking all over her. So in this scene, the living are walking on the burial stones and it's actually hurting the ghosts. So Amelia's going to do something about that. If she died a martyr, at least she deserves peace. So this part, if she died a martyr, at least she deserves peace. That gives me an idea of why she's taking this action, what it means to her, and what's driving her. But the rest of this, I've said, good, I can understand what's driving her actions in this scene. I'm curious, though, how this connects to her need to help others. Is she doing this for her own sake, to help the other ghosts? In this next scene, point, oh dear, which one is it? Nope. Amelia takes her death into her own hands and gets things done, even if rashly. Okay, but what's she thinking during this scene? How is she making sense of what's happening? What thoughts are driving her actions? And then again, Amelia fulfills her mission and saves momentarily in the story. She earns her place, falls for Aurelio, her death improves, but then her cure is frustrated. So I said, why does she help in the story? Because she's compelled to help. And then here, this green one, actions have consequences and others seek revenge. And I've said this appears to be a moral for the scene. You want the point to reflect how Amelia is making sense of the world and how she's changing. These morals become prominent throughout the rest of the outline, but they're not helping you understand your character or plot. When you find these morals, replace them with what Amelia is feeling, thinking, choosing in that scene. I will highlight the morals in green. So you can see there are a lot of these just kind of morals. So cooperation wins to finally ensnare the evil living memory of Nero. There's more to the world than we think. There is something magic about music. It's like the soul, and the soul can overcome longing. These aren't really related to how Amelia is making sense of the world. And this is not an uncommon thing to have in an inside outline. A lot of times authors will use the point kind of as their point. So Patrick might be wanting to convey this kind of idea, this moral through this scene. Sometimes authors will say things like, this is the meet cute, or this is the point of no return, or this serves to establish the character's need to da 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 da. But you really want the point to be specific and deep in the character, the protagonist's experience of the world. Because when you are specific, you connect with people. When you are broad, you don't. So for example, like with the pandemic, if I hear all the numbers of people who've been infected and who have died, that doesn't really mean anything to me because it's such a big number. I can't understand it. But if you tell me one story about a person, then I connect with that. And so it's kind of the same with every aspect of your book, really. You want to choose, and you want to go deep and specific, especially in your point, because this is how you get that that interiority in your scenes. This is how you know what your character cares about. And this is the best way to help you as an author to write scenes that really work. So suggestions for Patrick. I kind of already mentioned these, but I would suggest that, he define his point and then clarify his character arc based on that point. And I would want him to be really specific. So what does Amelia believe at the beginning of the novel? So for example, she might believe something like, the needs of others are more important than my own. And then what does she believe at the end of the novel? So she might believe, I need to take care of myself, my own needs, before I meet the needs of others. And then we would want to see in each point here, we would want to see her changing slowly from that first belief to that final belief. So one of the reasons I think Patrick may have kind of lost Amelia in the middle here is because of Amelia's lack of agency. So this is a pretty common problem in novels. Oftentimes characters are just responding to like random plot events that happen, but that's really not what we want. We want the character to be creating their own destiny. And Amelia really has agency at the beginning. So she saves these orphans. She stops people from walking on this burial stone. She goes to this magic well and engages with this ghost Nestori, and it steals Nestori's little black book of curses. And then tries to free Nestori from Nero's curse, and then Nero lashes out at her and puts her into the body of Bartimaeus, this artist. And then Nero infects Bartimaeus with true sight, so he can see demons lurking under the skin of the world. But once Amelia is in another character's body, she kind of disappears. So in this scene, for example, Bartimaeus is really the actor in this scene. Amelia does something small. She pushes him to draw angels, but she's not the one who's really taking action. So I've said, what can Amelia do in this scene that causes Bartimaeus to be taken? And then in the next scene, they're in this monastery, I assume getting treatment or being, what's it called? You know what I'm talking about. And this young woman, Ambra, notices Amelia in Bartimaeus's body and invites Amelia into her own body. And so again, I've said this is another scene where Amelia isn't acting to move the plot forward. What can she do to cause Ambra to notice her? And then we get down to here, and Amelia isn't even mentioned in this scene. So I've said we've lost Amelia now. She's the character we care about, so we need to follow her through the story. What is Amelia doing in this scene? How does this move her toward or away from her goal? I'm going to highlight in yellow the scenes where Amelia is missing. So you can see there's all these scenes where Amelia isn't even mentioned. And there are a few scenes where I can't quite tell what Amelia is doing. So they seek to find, they return to the monastery. I don't know quite what Amelia is doing there. And another problem with this is that Amelia isn't the one who's solving her own story. So here, Amelia does take action. She shares with the monks her theory of what's happened. And so because she does that, they all kind of go and try to cure this Nero's curse. But again, here, I don't see Amelia being super actively engaged in that. So it seems like other people are the one who are solving this story problem. And then here they trap Nero. But again, I don't see Amelia here. Here, Bartimaeus captures these last three crows who are kind of holding Nero's curse. And then Donna Isabella, the older woman that they actually go into at the end, releases the souls. And so I said, how does Bartimaeus even know about the crows? By having Bartimaeus capture these crows, you're removing from the reader the satisfaction of having Amelia solve the story problem, the curse. The reader wants to follow Amelia through this journey, to see her struggle, fail, and grow, and then see her triumph in the end. We want to see Amelia solve her own story. Ideally, it's a change in Amelia's arc, an internal change in Amelia that solves the external story problem. So what does Amelia learn that allows her to confront Nero, and then later to free herself from Ambrose? So down here, in the last scene, Amelia again is not saving herself. She is being saved by other people. So I said another scene where Amelia seems to have no agency. She isn't freeing herself in any way. She's at the mercy of other people to save her. The reader will want Amelia to save herself, unless Amelia's arc is actually about surrendering control and recognizing that she needs to let others help her. If that's the case, Amelia would save herself by allowing others to save her. So you can see that we've kind of just lost Amelia. She really starts this story, but then it becomes other people's stories. And I think part of the reason that happened is because Patrick, I know from emailing with him that he is writing from multiple points of view. So he's writing from Amelia, Ambrose, Bartimaeus's, and Tiberio's point of view. But he says there's no whole chapter or scene dedicated to another point of view. So that would make me wonder if Patrick is writing in omniscient. And if he is, even in omniscient, it's best to stick to one point of view per scene. Because if you switch around, that's called head hopping, and it's really confusing for the reader. For example, I just read 2 books that were written in omniscient, and they were switching back and forth in one scene between point of views, and I kept getting confused and having to stop and reread. So I would ask Patrick, like, why are you writing from so many point of views? Do all these characters need to tell this story? So if you removed one of these point of views, would the story fall apart? Or can you just tell that scene from a different character's point of view? To me, it seems like Amelia is the protagonist of this story. I mean, she's the one who starts it. She's the one who Patrick talks about in the character arc. And it seems that this is a series because this book is called Nero's Curse. And so given the title, I'm pretty sure we're going to be following Amelia through this whole story. So the reader's really, I think, going to want to follow Amelia closely through this story. So I guess I would encourage Patrick to really think about what point of views he needs here and to try to limit them. And where you do have different point of view characters, you always want to come back to Amelia because she's the one we're really connected with and are following. And, you know, this is Patrick's story. He can do what he wants. He's the god of his story. But my sense is that Amelia is the one that we are supposed to care about. If he does choose to include more point of views, each of those characters needs to have a full arc, needs to be connected to the point, and whoever the point of view character is a scene, should be the one making a choice that drives the plot forward. I will also say that I've read 2 manuscripts in the past year that have written multiple souls in a single body. One of them is Shelby, who was here earlier, at least. I don't know if she's still here. I'm not looking, but it's really hard to do. So Patrick, if you decide to stick with multiple point of views in a single body, you're going to have to work really hard to differentiate their voices and their goals and their character arcs so that we can track it. Okay, so I also just want to say, I know this is perhaps a little overwhelming, but these are all fixable things. It's really just about choosing what you want your book to be about, because we have to make a choice. The story has to hang on a single trunk. And you can have all these branches of subplots and other things happening, but they all need to relate to kind of this braided idea of point and character arc and conflict. And before we get to questions, I just really want to quickly jump back over to the Inset Outline. And if you would like to be coached on your Inset Outline, I offer a coaching package for this. So it includes a 45-minute pre-coaching call, 4 deadlines of feedback on your Inset Outline and 1-page book summary, a 30-minute call whenever you need it during the coaching process, and then a 45-minute call at the end to discuss moving forward. It costs $400. But if you contact me by July 3rd, which is my anniversary, you'll get an extra deadline of coaching. So you'll get 5 deadlines instead of 4. And I don't remember if I said this at the beginning. I coach fantasy and soft science fiction writers. So that would be like dystopian, lit RPG, any science fiction that doesn't care too much about the actual science. And I'm definitely going to push you to write a book with emotional depth. So you can contact me through my website at daniabernathy.com. And if you would like to be coached, but you don't think I'm a good coach for you, Author Accelerator actually matches writers with coaches for free. And they have all kinds of coaches in all genres, at all price points, all coaching styles. And it's just, they're a really excellent organization. So you can find them at authoraccelerator.com. And I'm also just going to throw in that if you think that being a book coach sounds like the best job in the world, get in touch with me and I will get you in touch with Author Accelerator. They have an amazing training program and community. Let me make sure I didn't forget anything. Okay. Oh, also, I think that, if you have a limited money to spend on your book, I think the Inset Outline is the best place to spend it because you can really solve all these story problems before you start writing. Okay, I'm done. Let's do questions now. What questions do you guys have? You can either type in the chat or I'm fine if you hop on and talk.
For doing this for us. We Ozark Book Authority, we are a literary supporting organization based in Northwest Arkansas to people that readers and writers alike. And this is just the monthly events that we put on. And please check us out on Facebook and on our website, ozarkbookauthority.com, and to stay informed of all of the events that we have. This event has been recorded and live streamed, so you will be able to go back through and rewatch it if you missed anything. That's my bit.
Yeah, Shelley. So can you talk a bit about discovering your theme? What questions can you ask a writer to discover it? So one of the questions I would ask you is, why do you want to tell this story? Why is it important to you? And I don't mean that in like a plot level kind of way. I mean it in a really deep level sort of way. So a lot of times we want to tell a story because it matters to us on a deep personal level. And so, maybe you've had an experience in your life and you're kind of, this story is an iteration of that. And so I think a lot of times figuring out your why for your story can help you figure out, your point. I'm trying to think of other questions I might ask. Sam is here too. She's actually a coach as well. So Sam, if you have anything to add, you can jump in here. I can definitely tell you that if I saw your point, I would have questions for you. But I'm not thinking of any at the moment. Or maybe Ryan as well. Is Christy here? No. Ryan, if you have any thoughts on that as well, you're welcome to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my main thought on that is, I mean, as somebody that I think, as Dan explained at the beginning, for me, I've written my manuscript over and a half time so far. And I feel like if I had gone through this process beforehand, I would not still be writing this book. Because I think one of the benefits of going through this process is it does force you to like sit and really think about like what it is you want to say when you're done writing, like what it is you actually communicate. I think for me, I kind of wrote my way into it by getting to the end of my manuscript. But I do think if I had done a process like this, I would not have had to. I wouldn't have had to like write my way there over the course of 200 pages.
Any other questions?
I've just got another comment. I've been working with Dani for the last couple of months on my Inset Outline, and I just really can't recommend the process enough. Like I'm not a published author, so I don't have any, grounds to recommend it as like a pathway to getting published. But I will say, like, I think it's making my writing a lot better, and I think it's making the writing a lot more enjoyable. So I just want to offer that perspective.
I found that to be true as well. The first time I submitted a chapter to our writing group after doing my own Inset Outline, Ryan and the other writer who were there, like, basically said that my writing had like leveled up. And it was because I knew exactly what the characters were thinking. And in this case, I had actually created an Inset Outline for every character in my scene. So I knew what they were all thinking. And I was working really hard to get that point on the page for each character.
This is Sam, the one who's the other coach that Dani mentioned. For the gal who asked how you get to your theme, I think one way you can look at it is ask yourself why you are writing the book, what message it is you want to share with your readers, and from that message or that passion that is driving you to write it, I think that is where you can pull your theme from.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, Susie. We're doing questions now.
Perfect. Sorry I'm late. I just came from my other event.
Is my microphone still freaking out, Dani, or are we okay?
It sounds better now.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't realize I was doing it before.
I could hear you like half the time. So
Yeah. What I said before was just that please check us out, ozarkbookauthority.com and Ozark Book Authority on Facebook. We do events every month to help the reader and the writer, and we try to support literacy through education and outreach in events like this. Do we want to continue waiting for some more questions, or do we want to try to wrap it up? What do you think, Dani?
I mean, it seems like if anyone has a question, just, raise your hand, but we can wrap it up, I guess.
Looks like Ellen's raising her hand.
I have a question. Dani, we're talking about the inside outline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I missed the first part. Okay, so I wanted to talk about how you use the inside outline for a story arc, like for nonfiction, and whether you have any experience with that.
I have no experience with that.
No.
Lucy.
Okay, I don't know, because I'm working on something right now where I'm trying to figure that part out, and I do know that the inside outline you wanted to use the reader's perspective. I find it really tricky. So like, because you do the inside outline, so the scene, and then the point is what the reader gets out of it. So.
Right. So I don't know this method of the inside outline. I think it's called the outcome outline. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. So at Author Accelerator, this is another method of coaching that you can learn. And so I think with a nonfiction, you try to decide what your reader's arc is, so where you want them to end up after finishing your book. And so at the end of each chapter, the point is what you want the reader to have learned, where you want the reader to be. And you can also use the inside outline with memoir as well. And you would think of yourself as the protagonist. And so, memoir is not like a biography. It's not your whole life. Memoir is held together by a theme. And so in a memoir, you would track your arc, your arc of change through the story as well.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's tricky, because some combination nonfiction are, memoir and also self-help. So it's almost like you have to do both. In that point, you've got to have what the protagonist or the memoir person is, and then you've also got to have what the reader's getting out of it, because it's self-help. So yeah, thank you. That was helpful.
So helpful with that. Ellen, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
How long did it take you to learn how to do this, and how long has it been taking people who aren't experienced to learn how to do it if they weren't used to thinking this way?
So you mean like creating your own inside outline for your story?
Mm-hmm.
So you can make an inside outline in a few hours if you want to, but the coaching process, if you were to hire a coach, typically my experience has been that it takes like 5 or 6 deadlines to really get your story drilled down, to get all the logic in place, to figure out what you want your character arc to actually be. If you're not getting feedback on your inside outline, then, I think you would want to give it a few revisions. So maybe write it and then leave it alone for a little while and come back to it, because you're gonna see it with fresh eyes. You're gonna see new holes, and maybe you're gonna see places where the character is not acting logically, or maybe you're gonna have new vision for kind of what your point is, or what your character's arc is. I do think that there's some magic to getting feedback on your inside outline. I actually coached my coach on her inside outline. And so she's been coaching people on this for like years, and she knows her stuff, but there were a lot of holes in it because there's just something about having someone else's eyes on your story, because you're so in it that you can't see the problems that are there.
Okay, thank you.
But I will also say, Author Accelerator has an inside outline course, which is similar to this webinar. It's more detailed, but it's not too expensive. So if you go to authoraccelerator.com, you can find their course for that. And then of course, if you want to coach, you can contact me or Author Accelerator for that. Should we wrap it up?
Sure. It sounds like we're probably got all the questions. Thank you again, Dani, for sharing this with us. We appreciate it. It's was very. I learned a lot. It's given me some insight on trying to just. I'm not a great person at writing outlines for myself. I usually get buried into the story, and then I come back and say, "Wait, I should have outlined this." So,
Right.
just trying to consider different alternatives, and then maybe I'll reach out to you for some coaching.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So thank you.
I will also say, if you want to get in touch with me on social media, I'm most active on Instagram at Dani Abernathy Author. I'm also on Facebook, but I don't check it as much. So my website or Instagram are the best places.
And your website is again?
DaniAbernathy.com. It's on the handout. I'll put that back in here just in case anyone joined later.
And we'll want to make sure we link to it in the YouTube video as well. Well, fantastic. Thank you, Dani. And thanks everyone for joining us. And let's go ahead and end it at that. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Everyone have a great day.
You too. Thanks a lot, Dani.
Thank you, Ryan. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.